This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
Hi, my name is Igor Kheifets, and this is the List Building Lifestyle, the only podcast which delivers cutting-edge conversion strategies from the online trenches straight to your earbuds. Download the transcript of today's episode and all future episodes at listbuildinglifestyleshow.com. I also invite you to grab a free copy of the Wealthy List Builder Survival Guide at listbuildinglifestyleshow.com/survival. And now, once again, it's time to claim your list building lifestyle. Welcome back to another edition of the List Building Lifestyle with your host, Igor Kheifets. Back in the 1960s, at the time that was great for experiments and all kinds of trials, there was an evil scientist. And I call him an evil scientist. We're going to call him Alfred just for the sake of this episode. But the reason I call him evil is because he was conducting shock experiments on dogs. So the guy didn't have a heart. And, of course, we're not going to jump into whole debate about whether or not it was ethical for him to conduct shock experiments on dogs. But I personally feel that he was an asshole for doing that. Nevertheless, he made his way into the annals of history, if you will, by conducting a very important experiment and learning about one particular character trait that has been defining, our life in many ways. So what he discovered is this. He started ringing a bell and then conducting a light shock on his dogs anytime he would ring a bell. So what happened was that the dogs developed this reaction, this response, where now he could ring a bell and he didn't have to shock the dog, but the dogs would still show a response as if they were just shocked with electricity. So this is classical conditioning, of course, and this is something that Pavlov established a long time ago, only he found a more, a less sadistic way of doing it, of course, with food. But, Alfred, our hero, did not stop here. What he'd done, he proceeded to the next experiment and he put together a wooden crate and he divided it in the middle with a really just low wall, a wall that was low enough for the dog to jump above. And he made sure that on one side of this crate, the floor was electrified. Basically, he could press a button and a light shock would go through it. And on the other side, there was no electricity. So, he couldn't hurt anyone doing that. So he puts these dogs on the one side of the crate where he can electrify them and he presses the button. What he expected to happen was he expected the dogs to recognize they're being shocked and jump over this tiny little fence or whatever that was to the other side of the crate where there was no shock. But the dogs showed the most incredible response. They simply lie down. So what happened was the dog learned, all dogs unanimously learned that they could not resist or do anything about this electricity constantly shocking them after the first experiment, and they didn't even try escaping it. Okay, Igor, so I get it, but I'm not a dog. I understand that, if I'm being shocked or electrified, I should run the other way. And I know that I could jump over that fence. It just seems stupid, to even compare me to a dog. Well, in some way, you're right. And, in many ways, many small things in life, we learn to basically identify danger and fight it or run away from it. But in many ways, we are no different, you and I, than these dogs in those experiments, because we attempt to do certain things and we attempt to do them with we just give it our best. And yet we fail anyway. And soon we learn to expect failure. So we've become helpless, but we weren't born helpless. We weren't born with the knowledge of us not being able to do something. We learned to be that way. And the concept that Alfred, the evil scientist, actually introduced us to is called learned helplessness. And you should look it up because it is one of the reasons why people simply fail in this business. They attempt to do something once, they attempt to write an email, perhaps they attempt to, set up their follow-up sequence, or they run a paid ad campaign or whatever, and they fail once and then try it again, and then they fail again, and soon they learn to be helpless. Whether they're aware of it or not, whether they choose to be that way, whether they choose to say, okay, you know what, I'm not technical, and this is really taking way more time than I was hoping it would take. And I really hope for this to become a part-time business, not a full-time job. So yeah, I'm not gonna try and do that again anymore, right? Or because they're not well, just kind of have this unconscious response to and not wanting to experience the feeling of embarrassment and humiliation that you experience when you fail to figure something out, when you fail to overcome a problem. So they just stop trying altogether and they move to the next thing. And that's how the whole shiny object syndrome starts. You attempt something and you kind of fail, or maybe you learn about something, you don't even attempt that because you're like, man, this is way too complicated. I didn't sign up for this. I'm looking for something that's going to take me 15 minutes a day. So you kind of just move to the next tactic on your list and you consume more information, and that doesn't seem easy enough. You move forward, etc. Which of course is a different side to it. It's not quite learned helplessness. That's more like laziness. But in this episode, I really wanted to make you aware of the fact that a lot of the things you feel you can do are simply learned responses to a bunch of failures that happened in succession and one after the other, where you've got conditioned basically that what, there's no point in trying anymore because I know I'll fail, so why bother? Just like that dog. Another great story, by the way, that illustrates this point is when they bring an elephant into a circus and they got to tame the elephant. So they bring a baby elephant and they tie him to a stick in the ground. Now, the thing about it is that the stick isn't really big enough, and it's not being secured hard enough for the elephant to not escape. Like the elephant can actually easily escape, but after trying a couple of times to pull it out and not fully succeeding, the baby elephant learns that, what, this is not going to work, so I better stop trying. And all of a sudden the baby elephant developed this knowledge somehow, right, that if he's been tied to a stick or a pole in the ground, that's pretty much it. He's not able to move. He's not able to go anywhere. That's why they say the elephant never forgets, right? That's the whole thing about that. So, but the truth of the matter is, the baby elephant could pull that stick out, and the grown up elephant, which he later becomes, could easily escape, could easily pull that pole out of the ground, but they don't. They just don't. They don't even attempt. They learn to be helpless. And that is, in my opinion, of course, tragic, simply because think about all the things you gave up in life simply because you learned to expect failure. Think about all the things you have not achieved because you said to yourself, what's the point in trying? Think of all the amazing things you did not give to this world or your family that you could have if you've only tried again and again and again and figured out new ways of doing it. And the answer, I mean, the answer. I don't have to convince you about it. You know that the answer is you haven't tried hard enough. And chances are you're now sitting there, either in your car or you're like in the gym running right now, whatever. And you're thinking, you know what? What this crazy Russian says makes a lot of sense. And all of a sudden you have all these pictures and little scenes running through your mind of things you could have done, but you didn't because you gave up. And that's okay. Acknowledging the fact that you could have done better is perfectly fine. But right now, I want you to focus on the present. And what is it that right now, what are you attempting to do right now where you keep bumping your head against the wall that you're not capable of doing for some reason, you're not able to achieve it, and yet you know that it's that time when you have to become aware of the learned helplessness concept and make sure you don't fall into that trap. Okay, whatever that is for you, whether it is writing your first email, whether it is running your first paid traffic campaign, or maybe running your second, right? Maybe, you wanted to attempt creating your own information product finally. Maybe you decided to master retargeting and you didn't do it because it was too complicated. Whatever that is, okay, whatever that is, don't let the learned helplessness concept get in the way for you, because that would be tragic. I mean, you will regret this a year, 2, 5, 10 years down the road, saying, you know what if I tried harder? What if I gave it one more shot? What if I consulted one more expert? What if I, what if I, read another book? Maybe I would have found the reason why I'm not successful. And when we think about it, isn't that the reason? Isn't that the difference maker between the losers and the winners in this business? Like the losers, they attempt something and they give up and they kind of move on, and they attempt that and they give up and move on. And that's sort of like they're stuck in this, cycle, if you will, where it's always consuming new information, trying something out, failing, and then moving to the next thing. And of course, with the internet giving them plenty of options, they can keep doing it forever. But the winners, they have this stubbornness about them where they refuse to take no for an answer from anybody, be it a person or a situation or the universe, where they say, okay, this is my goal, this is my ideal outcome, and I've attempted A, B, C, D, and E to make it happen. But I still got, oh man, I just realized I have no idea what comes after E. But they still have all these other letters of the alphabet, to attempt, and they keep going and they keep going and they keep going, and admitting that they can't do something is probably the last thing on their list. They have this weird, almost impossible, inexplainable, almost stupid stubbornness about them, which makes them obsess with achieving the goal no matter how many times they need to try again and again and again and again. And really, that's how winners are born. If you watch, there's a great show that I've just watched with my wife, a great TV show called Genius. It's about Einstein. This guy developed his theory for years, I think close to a decade. It took him to develop the theory of relativity, if not more than that. And then it took another several years to prove it, which means between, actually developing it and that being proved, there was, there was so much time that he could have easily doubted himself and a lot of things could have changed. But, eventually it was proved and he won the recognition. But while a lot of people think that he was a genius, right, because it would just come to him in a flash of inspiration. All of a sudden, he's like, oh man, I know, it's MC2, But it wasn't. It was the result of years of hard work on mathematical equations, on understanding physics, on trying to fill all the missing pieces to his puzzle, because he was trying to figure out the universe. I think that's more complicated than trying to build an online business that makes you, $100 a day. Way more complicated. And and it took him way more time too. So what I'm saying is, even though, he's considered a genius, Einstein, he worked really, really hard and he was stubborn and obsessed about attempting it again and again and again and again and again, even when a mathematician that was competing against him for developing the theory towards the time when he was almost there was a mathematician that really didn't believe that physicists could solve complicated math problems. And so he raced Einstein to complete the theory, and he did it first. And he actually completed this thing first, and Einstein gave up. It was like, he was just so discouraged. It was the end for him. But even then, he studied this guy's equations and found a mistake in that equation, which led to him developing his theory and finally finishing it and coming up with the correct answer for the problem that he was basically trying to solve for close to a decade, if not more than that. So what you learn from this is that he didn't learn to be helpless even after failing in an abstract environment where there were no guidelines, rules. He couldn't measure his progress. He didn't know whether he was, close to solving it or whether, he was just in the beginning. So it was a really difficult time for Einstein, yet he kept on going and going and going in spite of, being shocked, metaphorically speaking, all these years and being in pain. So if he could do it, right, if he could figure out the universe and he was not a genius, okay, which is, again, it's ironic that people think that guys like Einstein are geniuses because they're just simply obsessed with one thing in their life and they devote their entire life to it. That's how genius, if you will, is born. Then, just think about how you can achieve your goals by simply refusing to learn to be helpless. So, thanks again for tuning in for another episode of The List Building Lifestyle. This is your host, Igor Kheifets. And until next time we chat, have a good one. Thank you for listening to The List Building Lifestyle. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes or Google Play to never miss an episode. Because who knows, just one conversion tactic we share on the show might double your list and double your business. Download the transcript of today's episode and all future episodes at listbuildinglifestyleshow.com. And don't forget to claim your complimentary copy of the Wealthy List Builder Survival Guide at listbuildinglifestyleshow.com/survival. This is Igor Kheifets, and until next time we talk, have a good one.
This is the podcastfactory.com.